Good morning, everybody, and welcome to you all to this Luncheon lecture on China-India competition in the Indian Ocean. And like the previous session, we do have a little technical problem with your speakers this morning. And this is very unfortunate because she is located in the United States. But not only did she wake up early, but she's having a problem connecting with us. So I will just request a little bit of patience because she's going to be there in a minute. And actually, she is there, so we can now start. Darshana, welcome very warmly this morning.
Thank you.
Let me say that we have so far focused our discussion on the Indian Ocean, India-China relationship, in general, or to the land border dispute in particular. And we have had a series of speakers who just discussed this very issue, as well as the political one. What we will look at today is a slightly different dimension of India-China relationship, their relationship in the Indian Ocean. Only a few years ago, this was not even discussed. This was not really an issue. Not that there was no Indian Navy, not that there was no concern about the Indian Ocean, but whatever happened at sea was seen merely as an extension of what was happening on land. And if you look, for example, at military scenario regarding possible conflict in the Indian Ocean, it was all about horizontal escalation, the continuation at sea of a conflict started at land. Now, the Indian Ocean has acquired a very specific dynamic and a dynamic of its own. So this is in this perspective that we have asked this morning Darshana to intervene. And let me say that this is not just about curiosity regarding the Indian Ocean per se. This is very much a European issue as well. 70% of European trade outside Europe travels through the Indian Ocean, and therefore we cannot ignore whatever happens there. Potentially, this is also through the Indian Ocean that Europe will be integrated somehow into the Indo-Pacific dynamics. And if you remember, the EU strategy for cooperation in the Indo-Pacific, the Indian Ocean is described as the gateway to the Indo-Pacific. So this is therefore an area of utmost importance for us. And I'm very glad that we have Darshana this morning to discuss this specific issue of India-China relationship in the area, because this is going to be the structural dimension of the region. Darshana is a well-known scholar. She is currently a fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace in Washington, D.C., but she's also a scholar of international stature. She was previously in the Japan Institute of International Affairs in Tokyo. She has been working at the Australian National University in Canberra, as well as at the Lowy Institute. And she has been working in India as both the Observer Research Foundation and Carnegie India. She's currently leading the Indian Ocean Initiative, and we could therefore have nobody more qualified to speak about the issue today. And for those of you who are not yet familiar with her work, I would strongly advise you to go visit the Carnegie website and look at her articles. They are very original because she focuses a lot of her work on the island states, which are one of the prize in the current game being played between India and China, but beyond that, between China and the rest of the world. With those words, Darshana, the floor is yours, and we have been waiting patiently to listen to you.
Thank you so much, Frédéric. And I'm really sorry for the delay this morning. Something happened after 2 years of Zoom. We're still facing technical issues. Clearly, perhaps can get a little better at that. Again, my apologies for starting a little late today, but thank you for having me, and thank you for this very kind introduction to earn my work this morning. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I thought today the conversation, I would frame it under sort of three broad themes. One is to talk about, I'll start with India's view of the Indian Ocean, just broadly in terms of how India traditionally has viewed the Indian Ocean, because I think there are sometimes assumptions or perhaps understanding of how India views the region as as an area that is important to Delhi, and then come to sort of Beijing's presence, or as China started coming into the Indian Ocean region, then go on to the competition, and within the conversation, I will certainly also weave in regional perspectives. As Frédéric mentioned, I focus quite a bit on the perspectives from island nations in the area, and that is a bit of work that I have been putting in some research into, and I would be delighted to share some of that perspective with you. I also wanted to take the opportunity today to share an interactive map that we had just launched last week on the Indian Ocean region. I think when we talk about, at least from my point of view, when we talk about any region as vast as the Indian Ocean that expands across from Africa to the western coast of Australia, perhaps visualizing some of these issues might be easier. I'll try and share my screen and see. I should have been here earlier to test this, but I think it should work. Can you see the screen, Frédéric?
Yeah, this is fine.
All right. We just sort of launched this interactive map, and I would, of course, welcome you to use this tool and see there are different layers that we have. But for the purpose of the conversation today, I'll just have the map here and going into some of these features as and when it appears during the conversation. From an Indian point of view, I think I would like to start with the fact that the entirety of Indian Ocean, of course, is considered by New Delhi as an area of priority, an area of interest, an area of importance from a strategic, political, economic, and security interest, but the Indian political class has not always looked at the Indian Ocean as an area of advantage or an area of opportunities, and not the entirety of the Indian Ocean region. I think somewhere between particularly after the end of the Cold War, the Indian Ocean was divided into two oceans, the Eastern Indian Ocean and the Western Indian Ocean, where India and France emerged as the two key players on each side of the ocean. And there were one of the big issues, I think, in studying the Indian Ocean today, that the region faces is most governments across the region, whether it is Delhi, whether it's Paris, Canberra, Tokyo, DC, or any other government, even within the littorals, I would say, has divided the Indian Ocean region into continental subregions. So if you're looking at, say, Sri Lanka, it's South Asia, and if you're looking at Comoros, it's Africa. And one issue that has emerged out of it is that it somewhere, I suppose, undermines the importance or the perspective that emerges from looking at the region as one theater, as the maritime domain. This continental, even from the US point of view, in fact, there, of course, on the DoD side, the Indian Ocean is divided into three combatant commands: Indo-Pacific, Africa, CENTCOM, and Africa. This continental division of the region has somewhere undermined, and I think to an extent overshadowed the concerns and voices of the littorals and the islands. Unlike in the Pacific, the Indian Ocean islands are 6, and they don't have one platform like the Pacific Island Forum. So the conversations were not perhaps as visible or as highlighted as we would hear from the Pacific side, and they would get covered under IORA at the best at the regional forum, or South Asia or Africa desk or Middle East desk. And India's division of the Indian Ocean was also similar, where I would say Sri Lanka and Maldives, of course, if I had to draw these lines on the ocean, I would say Sri Lanka and Maldives would probably be the first line of interest, and then go up to Seychelles and Mauritius for the second line, and Madagascar, Comoros was essentially right at the periphery of its Indian Ocean mapping, and for perhaps for a long time missing, in fact. Without going into the details of sort of, I suppose, India's outreach to the region or the Indian Ocean, I would point towards one example, which would be when Prime Minister Narendra Modi went to Sri Lanka in 2015, he did a tour of the Indian Ocean Islands, and he was unable to go to Maldives at that point because of actually protest against India, anti-India sentiments on the island at that point in time. It was the first time in 27 years that an Indian Prime Minister had visited the islands, which shows how Delhi has approached the region or interacted with its maritime neighbors over the years. With the Indo-Pacific, of course, that conversation has changed, but from Delhi with this government, when they came into power in 2014, there were a number of policies that were launched, including neighborhood first policy, which put in a little bit more emphasis on its maritime neighbors as well. With the Indo-Pacific gaining more and more traction within India's political system and its strategic interest and its strategic supposed competition, the Indian Ocean today is, of course, a key area, a key priority. Their regular visits. There's been a step correction, I believe, somewhere along the way. And the maritime domain has certainly emerged as a key focal point for India's foreign policy engagement. But this reorientation towards the maritime domain is still fairly new, despite an understanding from the region that India has been a leading player in the Indian Ocean region. And I don't want to undermine India, the role India has played and the importance India holds in the region. But I think that role was also possible to play because of a lack of a direct competition up until the recent past. After, of course, the Cold War, when US presence in the Indian Ocean has essentially been to transit between its 7th Fleet and its 5th Fleet, and going from, say, Tokyo to Bahrain, there has been limited engagement from the United States as the bigger power, extra-regional power in the Indian Ocean. And I'm sure everyone's aware, France and India has a very good maritime partnership. There was no direct competition as such. As China has come into the region, as China has started deploying to the region, engaging with countries through economic initiatives, through military initiatives, and combined with India's growing tension with Beijing along its northern continental borders, the maritime domain has emerged to be that area where, yes, there is competition, but also perhaps where India enjoys a better advantage. So I personally see a lot more, perhaps, this competition growing out in the Indian Ocean region. But today, India and China are engaged in this strategic competition arena within the Indian Ocean region, which I think is heightened as well because of development along the continental border. To be sure, of course, the Indian Navy enjoys a better geographic advantage in the Indian Ocean region, its home theater, and despite the political, despite the political approach towards the Indian Ocean region, where Delhi might not have bureaucracies, the foreign policy bureaucracies may not have looked at the Indian Ocean as one area and as a whole, the Indian Navy has. If you actually go back to the Indian Navy's 2016 Maritime Security Strategy, it defines which is the latest one, it defines the entire Indian Ocean region, sort of from the eastern coast of Africa to the Straits of Malacca, as its area of interest and its area where it aims to be continuously and consistently. Since then, the Navy has also initiated a number of policies like mission-based deployment, set up the Information Fusion Center, and white shipping agreements and other agreements to be able to be present across the area. The political, I think there certainly has been a division between the Indian political bureaucratic divisions, again, bureaucratic class, and as well as the Navy within the Ministry of Defense. I wouldn't say that was a difference between Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I think the Navy certainly stands out in it because it's their operating domain. And MOD has been more concerned with continental, naturally, with continental challenges. The one thing, since the Navy has been pretty dominant in the area, whether it's from HADR, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, evacuation efforts, engagement with the region, training with island nations, offering assistance. The Navy has been taking a lead in this, but I think the first time that New Delhi expressed concern about China's presence in the region. China started, of course, officially coming into the region in 2018 when it started deploying deploying for anti-piracy missions in the Horn of Africa. In 2014, a Chinese submarine docked in Sri Lanka in a span of 2 months, I think, and that was perhaps the first time that there was a political reaction from New Delhi and then recognition of possibly a China in the maritime domain conversation. It wasn't that, yes, China's here and China's going to have an impact on India's maritime environment, but it was noticing the fact that it was the first time a Chinese submarine was in the Indian Ocean region, and it was in Sri Lanka, with whom, as you can see, these are some maritime boundary lines India shares a maritime boundary with. That was the first, I would say, where perhaps some alarm bells went on. And I think by 2015 and 16, there was a more clear picture of China's Belt and Road Initiative, which had the maritime security component. So that was being watched more closely. But in around 2016, the Indian Ministry of External Affairs sought to sort of correct some of their approach in the Indian Ocean region, and set up the Indian Ocean region division to look at the area as one, to look at the area in a complete, in a holistic way. When the division set up the Indian Ocean region as one to look at the region through islands, it covered the countries of Sri Lanka, Maldives, Mauritius, and Seychelles, but it left out Madagascar and Comoros, even at that point in time. I'm only highlighting that to see the division of the Indian Ocean and how there's still a tendency to see the periphery of the region or sort of the African coast as a continental maybe challenge or continental subdivisions of the region. But that was corrected in 2019, and today the Indian Ocean region division for India includes both all from Sri Lanka to all the way to Comoros. China's engagements in the region, of course, has been growing over the years. China has a base in Djibouti. Let me also at this point show one of the most commonly cited fact about the Indian Ocean region, I believe, is that it's a key trading route. It's a key, it's a great commercial waterway. And I believe EU just recently extended its area of interest to the Strait of Hormuz. I read something recently which will be here, but we wanted to project this importance of this trading route in the Indian Ocean region. And we mapped the movement of energy vessels across the area. And of course, there is an understanding and there is awareness around the density of traffic in the Persian Gulf and where this traffic is going. And of course, this route is important for European countries. But I would also draw your attention here to the southern coast of Madagascar and the importance of the I think the Southwest Indian Ocean is, and we'll come back to this later. And as I think there's a conversation about a possible secondary Chinese military facility in the region. And I think if the conversation is about gaining advantages across sea lanes of communication, I would say along with the Persian Gulf, the Southwest Indian Ocean region would perhaps come up equally important, if not more. As far as China is concerned in the Indian Ocean region, I mentioned that they've been there for anti-piracy missions, and they have strengthened their collaborations with islands in the Indian Ocean region. But I think China has been one country that has consistently been engaging with all the 6 islands of the Indian Ocean region. They are the only country with an embassy in each of the 6 Indian Ocean islands, of course, and they feature in almost all nations except for Seychelles, top trading maritime partners. I think they do for Maldives, Mauritius. They do. I think they do. Their Seychelles is the only one they probably are not. Yes, Seychelles is the only one they're not. Let's see, on Madagascar, they are both in import and export. Comoros is they import from, they don't export to. The other country that came up, which was, I think, was a surprise or was not a well-known fact, was actually the importance, was UAE. UAE has emerged also in almost every island's trading partner in almost top 5, and for Seychelles, as you can see, it's the #1 exporting and importing country from. Coming back to China, I think China, the assumption in the Indian Ocean region is that China is a new player that is coming into the region, and sort of, whether it is through economic initiatives or defense engagement, is trying to establish itself. And it is trying to establish itself because it's not a traditional player in the region. But China by no means is a new player itself. China has been going to the region for a while, and I think both Delhi and Paris are to a great extent perhaps have ignored the region in one way or the other, in a way that China has not. It looks at the area from Africa to all the way to the Straits of Malacca, at least, as one. It shows up, it has high-level visits, it has political engagement, it has embassy, it has economic, it has defense and strategic investments. The difference is that it is quite a distance for China to cover. Of course, the next phase of the map, actually, we're going to map the military presence in the area, and we'll be able to see better. But China, of course, has to cover quite a bit of distance, whereas, of course, for France and India and others, there are facilities in the area, and for India, it's the home theater. The other thing that is interesting in the Indian Ocean region, and I think it plays in favor of Beijing, I think, are the disputes in the Indian Ocean region. If this is a competition between India and China, or say China and the Western countries, if this is a competition between China, France, even if not directly, and European countries, China is the positive player in the Indian Ocean region because they have no legacy problem. There's no political baggage. They have no disputes in the Indian Ocean region. The Indian Ocean region disputes are with the US, UK, France, more traditionally, and few discomforts between, say, Sri Lanka, Maldives, and India. So China is actually the positive alternative player to, I think, how the region views as dominant Western players, which some of it sometimes emerges from the colonial period. So unlike the South China Sea, where China is a very aggressive, very assertive neighbor who's not willing to take into, I suppose, and follow international rules and norms, in the Indian Ocean, China is that positive alternative player who has the capital, who is willing to provide the infrastructure. There's no political baggage, there's no dispute, there's no sovereignty issue. They've been present in the area. China early this year, proposed creating an Indian Ocean Islands Forum, something that doesn't exist for the region. It wasn't done by one of the traditional players in the area. It was done by China. It hasn't been announced yet. It hasn't been hosted yet, of course. But I think the assumption that China is a competing player, or China is a destabilizing player, is not a view that is shared by the littorals or islands of the Indian Ocean region. And I think that is where the competition will come down to. The competition, the nature of competing with China in terms of if it is, even if you talk between India and China, the competition essentially is between deeper engagement with littoral and island nations. And if the island nations and the littorals themselves are not convinced about the positive role, or there is a need and a desire to expand beyond the traditional partnerships with India, with France, with Australia and others, China quickly emerges as that alternative player, not because they have the Belt and Road Initiative, but because also politically they have been showing up for years. They have been going to the region, they have been engaging with the region, they have been sort of, I think showing up is a good word to define China in the region, who probably has more water to cover, more distance to cover than other traditional players in the area. So in the Indian Ocean conversation, the one thing that we've been trying to say, and we've been trying to work on as well, and I personally has been trying to work on this, is to understand better the regional perspectives on the competition with China, because I think that will come down to play and shape that competition to a large degree. Who is offering what kind of engagement, what kind of military and defense engagement, what are the economic engagements in the region. In terms of, am I okay on time? Just I'll wrap up in 5 minutes. In terms of, if we were to do a little bit more, maybe what are we likely to see in the future? And I can go into specific projects or specific areas about India-China competition if there's an interest to hear about it. But I think we are certainly we'll certainly see more competition in the Indian Ocean region, but we'll also see another Chinese facility coming up somewhere in the Indian Ocean region. And I think I'll again turn on the shipping routes lane. And this is just the energy shipping route. This does not represent other goods, any other commercial goods. This is just the energy transit in the Indian Ocean region. And from a naval point of view, if whether it is to say resolve China's Malacca dilemma, these are the choke points and that are there in the Indian Ocean region, and it'll give you estimates of how much oil transits in the area, how important this is. We actually, even though not a choke point, we did mark the Mozambique Channel because we wanted to draw attention to the area. But if for China, the conversation is about protecting its Malacca dilemma, which is that if something happens in terms of a conflict between US and China anywhere in the Pacific, the view from Beijing is that their sea lines are their energy routes and their connection or their deployments to the area could come under threat because they have to transit the Straits of Malacca. They need to protect that. And to be able to protect that, you have to be present somewhere in the Indian Ocean region. We all know they have a base in Djibouti. And if you were to look at both protecting their area, but also maybe disrupting trade, if it is a time of conflict, I think they perhaps would have, there would perhaps be more, this route would perhaps create a lot more impact in terms of if there was any sort of disruption, given that they're already in Djibouti. That means you can cover much of the area here, at least through air and naval deployments. I'm not saying that should tomorrow there be a conflict, China will emerge victorious, but in the long run, when we are looking at strategic competition, I think that is what China would try to establish. And if we are talking about a Chinese military facility in the Indian Ocean region, which I don't think so is a matter of if, it's a matter of where, and the assumptions are that it will come up somewhere in it's always assumed all be Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, which possibly could be. But I think the western coast of the Western Indian Ocean or the eastern coast of Africa is a likely place, if not more, for such a facility to come up. I'll stop here in terms of just the overview on it, but I think I can go a little bit more deeper into some of these issues. It's a vast area and many themes to cover, and I can answer some of these questions through Q&A.
Thank you very much, Darshana, and thank you also for this very beautiful map, especially the last slide with the energy traffic. I mean, you probably have opened up more questions than you've given answers, and I'm hesitating as to which direction things should go in this discussion. So let's start perhaps with the question which had been asked already, and I remind you that you can all start posting questions in the Q&A box or the chat box eventually, and we will relay it to the speaker. The first question is, thank you from Hendrik Arne Paslik, sorry. Thank you for your great input regarding the debate within the Indian Navy whether to invest in a certain aircraft carrier or in submarines. What are the implications for competition with China? I'm asking you the question because it was asked by somebody in the audience, but I'm also asking you whether this naval dimension of the India-China rivalry in the Indian Ocean is the primary dimension of the rivalry.
No, absolutely. I think, as I had mentioned, I do believe the whole big part of the competition, and till the time we are talking about competition, will be decided in the Indian Ocean region, because that's also where Chinese vulnerabilities lie. I think to be able to even disrupt, or in a time of conflict, their movements in the area would have great impact on wherever else they're engaged. On the question of aircraft carrier versus submarines, I think, Frédéric, you're aware, it's a question that is very lively debate within India, within the Navy. The Navy, of course, says both submarines and aircraft carrier. But as many of you might be aware, budget is a real issue for the Indian Navy. I mean, this year the Indian Navy got a big hike, which was that it received 19% of the Indian defense budget, but otherwise, approximately, traditionally, India receives about between 14–15% of the defense budget. So I think in the long term, of course, that's what the Navy would want to do, to have two aircraft carriers and have sort of at least two operating aircraft carriers, and then increase the submarine fleet. But in terms of the competition, I think if you have one aircraft carrier at this point in time, and again, the Indian Navy might disagree strongly with me on this, because operational side is always different than, I suppose, the policy side of it. But doing research, when you have to account for the fact that there is a real resource crunch and there is a real budgetary crunch, right? And every time you have something happening along the Indian continental border, the Ministry of Defense, of course, is going to prioritize that, because that's an imminent threat. What's happening in the Indian Ocean is not an imminent threat, not as of now. It is something of the future. So I think even if the Indian Navy at this point, to balance that, if the goal is right now to defend its interests, which it very well can do, and also maintain the advantages it already enjoys in the Indian Ocean region, right? From an operation point of view, from an engagement point of view, I think having an aircraft carrier and increasing its, submarine fleet would perhaps give it more space for this sort of engagement in the short term, while working for the third aircraft carrier in the long run, however they are able to manage that budget. Anti-submarine warfare is certainly a top priority for the Indian Navy currently, because the next thing that is of concern is submarines coming into the Indian Ocean region. The Indian Navy chiefs have started publicly talking about the frequency of these deployments, the routes they take, where they're going, where they're staying, and the ability to monitor that, the ability to respond to that will also continue to grow. On aircraft carrier, the one thing I want to say is, of course, the aircraft carrier in every Navy has different approaches to it, but generally from from a Navy point of view, aircraft carrier has always been a mark of the ability to project power. So I think that is something the Navy would do, because you can go long distances and you're able to, provide air cover as well. But for India's point of view, for a country who has a strong policy of no overseas bases, I think LIMOA, Logistical Exchange Memorandum of Agreement, provide a great platform and provide a great opportunity for India to be able to operate across vast areas of the region. The Indian Ocean is really vast. For the Indian Navy to be able to, especially on the Western Indian Ocean side of it, you certainly need LIMOA facilitated access to facilities, military facilities or bases to carry out missions and operations. And that fortunately exists. I think as we speak right now, there's a P-81 deployed to Reunion for about 5 days for exercises and maritime domain awareness, kind of joint exercises and operations in the area. And I think this is one way that the Navy can perhaps take advantage of its existing agreement while it figures out how best to address the need for a third aircraft carrier and developing its submarine fleet.
Thank you. Speaking of the more or less imminent character of the threat in the Indian Ocean, how would you characterize precisely the threat in the Indian Ocean? I mean, the Chinese naval presence is there, and increasingly so, but I mean, this is not the only way China operates. Do we observe in the Indian Ocean action like the one we see, for example, in the South China Sea, where they do use their fisheries, their fish boats to in order to achieve geopolitical goals? How would you characterize that threat? Is the environment a dimension of this threat? I mean, how would you analyze this beyond the strictly military dimension?
Sure. I think that certainly is present in the Indian Ocean region as well. There's a lot of research, I think, along with fishing vessels is understood to be present there for surveillance purposes as well. As I mentioned, the Indian Ocean is an area where China would have to be present if it wants to be a maritime player, even if it doesn't have big, which it does, even if it didn't have big maritime goals. If China is looking to, say, be able to be present in the area, engage with its partners and establish and say that we are a credible alternative economic or military partner, not to say replace the countries that are already in the area, but then to say to add itself as the other partner or an alternative. That means it has to prove to its partners and players that it is able to reach the area and it is able to be present in times of crisis, whether it's for HADR, whether it's for any sort of other crisis. And for that, it has to be present. But like I mentioned, Indian Ocean is also the area of great vulnerabilities for China because it's not their operating theater. They need more time to be able to operate in that area to learn lessons and engage more. And that comes from military engagements and collaborations, but also from gaining information on the domain, on the Indian Ocean region, which can be done via research vessels or via fishing fleets. Today, I think fishing fleets also, ships or research vessels might have certain technology that could pick up important parameters, important aspects of deployments, per se. If you're able to, for instance, for submarine deployments, the depth of the water, salinity of the water, parameters as such are key areas in it. And something like that can be done through a hydrographic collaboration with, say, a country in the region, or even through your fishing vessels, provided what kind of fishing vessels are there. So I think there is that other element in there, in that the Indian Ocean, to address its vulnerabilities and capability gaps in the Indian Ocean region, I think it would certainly use other methods than just direct military engagement. And I think it would perhaps, in fact, I think the military engagement is one area where it would go the slowest, because that would warrant the biggest response or an opposition against China coming into the region. You can't necessarily say China is competing in the region if they're sending in fishing vessels, or if they're doing HADR operations, or if they're engaging more with other littorals and islands in the area who actually welcome it.
Thank you, Darshana. A question from Christoph Dalewski. Competition within the region. China is a new player perceived in the region as a source of financing. But now the question of sustainability of financing is raised in the context of Sri Lanka and the Maldives. Shouldn't we include and engage more the Indian Ocean island states in the EU-India dialogue trade negotiation in order to gather together to development needs of the region and provide with more sustainable finance? Is the kind of cooperation welcome in New Delhi? I think that falls right in your own specialty. So please, Darshana.
I think the question of sustainable financing has been around for a while, and I think what's happening in Sri Lanka is certainly going to be a cause of concern across the region. But I don't want to say that countries and islands are not necessarily or not completely unaware about the unsustainable financing aspect of Chinese projects and initiatives, and they're not perhaps all were done in the similar model or method as it was done in Sri Lanka. Islands are open to more collaboration, engagement, more initiatives, more projects, I think, and there has been many projects that have been and initiatives that have been announced. Japan and India announced the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor, an initiative under which there was an attempt to sort of provide alternative to Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, right, Maritime Silk Road, through infrastructure projects. The need for infrastructure is not new, but I think implementation is an issue. I do think EU can play a role in this, and I would also encourage from looking away from infrastructure projects under the umbrella of ports and bridges. I think that's not the only way that countries can provide financing or provide development in the region. I think there has to be an element of infrastructure financing which is built within climate resilient, which is built within sort of maybe it adheres to or addresses some aspect of blue economy. We have to be conscious of the environment where governments are seeking to provide solutions to. A solution for a city is not going to be the same model for an island, because the environment around them is completely different. So perhaps that sort of a model has to come up where there's a little bit thought between, okay, the decision is done, then maybe EU and India come up with some sort of an infrastructure or some sort of a development plan, project, initiative to offer to the region. But it does not necessarily always have to be, like I said, bridges and roads. I think it could also be on a sustainable development model for islands. I think International Solar Alliance is a great example, which already exists, that could be done. Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, disaster responding to natural disasters and recovering from that is one of the key issues that consume all the islands. Let me also share one thing. When I traveled through most of the islands in the Indian Ocean region, and when I asked them to define the top 5 security concerns, those were always, number one was always climate change, illegal fishing, drug smuggling, human trafficking. So it was always issues that I think bigger powers classify as non-traditional or soft security issues, right? So when you even talk about security, if say Delhi and Brussels defining security from the point of view of a naval base, a Chinese naval base, or a military exercise, and you look at the rest of the issues, put the rest of the issues in a soft security bucket, then you're also missing the conversation with the islands themselves, because their definition of security is different. So I think there's a need to maybe realign the way we look at some of these engagements. And yes, infrastructure is needed, but not all infrastructure has to be directed towards ports and bridges. I think we can move away from them. China wants to build them. I think they can build it. That is something that they are interested in. I think there are multiple different arenas, and where EU has the expertise to introduce that and offer in a meaningful way to the island nations.
So you agree with Christophe that yes, island states should be included in the conversation between India and, and the EU.
The way that if the conversation between India and EU is that we want to have an element of this where we can provide alternatives to the region, then yes. But I'm also conscious about in terms of, EU and India taking on the voices of the islands to say this is what they want and we are going to provide them, if that makes sense.
Okay, let's turn now to Philip Wolf, who comes back to the naval question. He says, you mentioned that India had a policy of not entertaining military bases abroad. Could that policy change in the future if China, for example, would welcome more and more present military in the Indian Ocean?
Even China had this policy. China had a policy of no overseas bases, but I think the way the two governments work is that it's much easier for China to overturn a long-term policy than for India it has. There is no conversation on that in India in any form or shape at this point in time. I don't know how things would go in the future, how it would work out, but I don't see India, it's not just a question of political will. I think it's a question of capacity and capital as well. To be able to set up another military facility somewhere else, you have to set that up in terms of, and also man it, right? So you need to have resources. I think for now, what works for India is the ability to use partners' facilities and deploy to areas and secure its interests. As and when we see more Chinese deployments in the region, and I don't think so, at least in the near to midterm, we're not going to see that kind of a rise of Chinese presence in the Indian Ocean region, in the sense that even if it will look quite a bit because it will be very new, India would still to a certain degree maintain its geographic advantage in the area and its operational advantages. I think it's a conversation. I think in the next 3 to 5 years we'll see Chinese aircraft carrier deployment to the region. That is coming. I think within the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to see another maybe 3 to 7 years, depending on how the situation in the region is, another military facility. But even if both of these developments happen, I don't see a conversation in Delhi which would urge India to set up an overseas base, but it could change. Maybe it can come in smaller versions in some other form. But I think from a research point of view, perhaps India is better placed utilizing its existing agreement with its partner, with its strongest maritime partners such as LEMOA.
I was going to ask you exactly that question. Would you say that the existing partnership are enough for India not to need to build base abroad?
I think it's a bilateral conversation between India and its partners. But today India has LEMOA with, of course, US, Australia, France, South Korea as well, Singapore. So I think if that conversation between India and its partners are strong enough, where you're able to do exercises and you're able to able to sustain or maintain presence for a particular period of time, I think for right now that is enough, because Indian Navy also has a mission-based deployment where they have selected about 7 areas in the Indian Ocean region, and they seek to be present there continuously. So that capacity exists. Can it be strengthened? Absolutely, but that comes from having more ships, and that's different. I think that's a route India is going. But from its maritime partnerships, in terms of its having facility access, I think at this point probably it's enough. It can be built on that. You can look to do more complicated exercises around that from there. utilizing these agreements, because I don't think so we have fully utilized to the maximum potential of these agreements yet. But I think they provide the basis for something to address a lot of these concerns.
Thank you. As time is running, but we still have time for a few additional questions. While we get that, I'd like to ask you to elaborate a little bit on the potential of an EU-India partnership in the Indian Ocean. We have seen a number of clauses. For example, the partnership on connectivity between India and EU contains a clause on cooperation in third country, which to my knowledge at least is so far unutilized or not very utilized. What do you make of this partnership between the EU and India in the Indian Ocean? Where do you think its priority should be? And what is lacking in order to this partnership to fully blossom?
In terms of partnership in the Indian Ocean region, the one thing that is, I think, at the top of my list is blue economy. I think that is one area where it's something that EU has done very well. EU has a more, I think, framed approach toward the subject. EU has a lot of coastal countries, a lot of islands that enjoy better development, sustainable development. There are frameworks in place for sustainable development. And I think this collaboration between India and EU to introduce some of these models, some of these innovative and technological approaches towards sustainable development in the Indian Ocean region will go a long, long way. Then I think any initiative that seeks to build some sort of an hard infrastructure, or again, coming back to the ports and bridges conversation around it, I think blue economy is an area which is a top priority for the region. And if you are really seeking to offer something that is of interest to the region, this should be right at the top of the list between India and EU. And I think that is one thing where the two countries play a role. Frédéric, you might be better placed to answer why India and EU have not reached the maximum potential of, or what is hindering this collaboration. But I think the one is
enlighten us on the Indian side at least.
But one is, I think number one is blue economy. It comes up in almost everything when we do, assessment of partner countries, who can do what are the areas and needs, and India, EU over and over again comes up. But I'm not sure why it is not going forward, where that conversation is. If there's but the second is illegal fishing. In response to illegal fishing, whether it is from information sharing, whether it's from training, whether it's from kind of training, building capacities in the region, I would say blue economy and illegal fishing would be the two top areas that India and EU can collaborate and actually have an impact in the region.
But the two entities, be it India or the EU, do not really speak to each other on on IU fishing. How do you explain that? From the Indian side, at least. And obviously, the EU side is our own turf. But
I think from an Indian side also, it's a you don't think of. When India thinks of the Indian Ocean, I suppose, on an area, you think about the countries that you regularly engage with in the region, right? And EU is not the country, at least not together. You can say India and France does, or India and UK does, or India and Germany does. But India and I think Delhi and Brussels don't engage so much on Indian Ocean region. It is something of been interest. We've seen the last couple of statements which features Indian Ocean region, but it's just one line in a statement of like 5 pages, right? Where it says we seek to collaborate more in the Indian Ocean region. Indian Ocean is a region of priority or an interest. But I think there hasn't actually been, and I'm not sure why that much of a conversation, but you were there at the Raisina dialogue. I think we can agree perhaps the India-EU conversation or the India-EU relationship is changing in a bit, that India's foreign policy is also looking more toward that. It's a time, and perhaps now all of the years that even you have talked about maritime partnership between India and EU, will finally see some results around it.
Well, with those very positive words, I'm afraid that we'll have to end this session. It's not that I don't want to answer, because there is no lack of idea, but there is clearly a problem in the implementation. Speaking of just IU fishing, I don't think that the DG Mari at the EU and the Indian government are discussing seriously on the issue right now, and this is where the EU policy regarding the issue is being made. So that doesn't explain why, but that explains how at least things are not done. A question that could be relevant in this regard is why India has not yet signed the port measure agreement, which is a mechanism which prevents ships practicing IUU fishing from unloading in some ports and provide information in real time to a set of other linked institutions elsewhere in the region. So that's part of the issue elsewhere. But anyway, I'm sure we will not exhaust this topic today. I would like, on behalf of all the audience and ourselves at the ECFR, to thank you very much, because you had to wake up early and face the additional stress of having a technical problem with us. We'll definitely look very carefully at the evolution on your project. Of course, the Indian Ocean Initiative. And again, thank you very much. Thank you all for being with us, and keep following us on this India-China Luncheon lecture series. And see you in June to speak about possibilities of decoupling between the Indian and Chinese economy with journalist Pramit Pal Chowdhury. Thank you, Darshana. Thank you all, and goodbye, and have a good day.
Thank you so much, Frédéric. Thank you.